Cedric's eyes snapped open. The ceiling above him was a stark, unfamiliar white. No cracks, no water stains, just pure, unbroken white. This wasn't his ceiling. This was wrong. All wrong. He pushed himself up. The movement felt strange. His limbs responded, but it was like watching someone else control them. He looked around the room. Minimalist. Cold, a single chair, a plain table, a closed door. It was like a showroom or a cell. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. He stood up. His balance felt off. He walked towards the only window. It was large. It showed a view, a garden, impossibly green. He reached out to touch the glass. It was cold, impassive. This wasn't a dream. This was sharp. Uncomfortably, terrifyingly sharp. He felt a growing unease. The silence was the first thing that truly unnerved him. It wasn't just quiet, it was an absence of sound. No distant hum of traffic, no chirping birds, no creak of the building settling. Nothing. Just a profound, absolute stillness that pressed in on him. It made his ears ache. He strained to hear something, anything. The thumping of his own heart was a lonely drum in an empty auditorium. This silence felt manufactured, deliberate. He looked down at his hands. They seemed like his hands. 10 fingers, familiar lines on his palms. But they looked too clean, too detailed. He could see the tiny pores in his skin, the almost invisible hairs on his knuckles. It was like looking at a high-resolution photograph. A level of detail he'd never noticed before, or perhaps a level of detail that wasn't there before. He flexed his fingers. They moved, they obeyed, but the sensation was distant, muted, as if filtered through a layer of something. The air he breathed felt clean, too clean, almost sterile, like filtered air in a laboratory. There was a faint scent, though, something he couldn't quite place. Not unpleasant, not exactly pleasant either, just new, unfamiliar. It didn't trigger any memories, no comforting association. It was the smell of nowhere he had ever been. He took a deeper breath. It filled his lungs, it sustained him. But it offered no comfort, no clues, only more strangeness, more questions. Every texture in the room screamed its reality at him. This hyper-realism was overwhelming. He tried to remember. What happened before this room, before the white ceiling? He squeezed his eyes shut. He searched for a thread, a connection, anything. There were flashes, images like corrupted data files, a face, a woman smiling. But her eyes were sad. Who was she? The image was vivid, yet he couldn't grasp her name or how he knew her. The memory felt implanted, not organic. Like a downloaded file he hadn't chosen, then other faces. Quick, fleeting. A man with a stern expression, another with a kind, worried look. Were they doctors, family, friends? He didn't know. The faces were clear, but the context was missing. It was like looking at photographs of strangers. Strangers who somehow felt important. A deep, unsettling feeling stirred within him, a sense of loss. But loss of what? Or whom? The harder he tried to remember, the more the fragments slipped away, leaving only an ache. Words echoed in the silence of his mind, snippets of conversations. "It's for the best, Cedric," whose voice was that? Smooth, calming, deceptive. Another phrase, "You'll adjust, everyone does." Adjust to what? This perfect silent prison? The words floated without anchor, without meaning. They were just sounds. Sounds that made him uneasy, sounds that hinted at a decision made for him, not by him. He felt like a puppet, his strings pulled by unseen hands. This place, this experience, it felt like an upgrade, a new operating system for reality, version 2.0, everything sharper, cleaner, more defined. But he hadn't asked for an upgrade, he hadn't consented. What was wrong with the old version? Was it buggy? Did it crash? He couldn't recall. The lack of recall was the biggest bug of all. A critical system failure located squarely in his own head. or what he thought was his head. He wasn't even sure about that anymore. Was he going mad? Had his mind simply snapped? Perhaps this was an institution, a very advanced, very subtle one, designed to soothe, to contain. But the perfection was the opposite of soothing. It was agitating. It was a constant reminder that something was fundamentally wrong. He looked for flaws, a crack in the wall, a flicker in the light, a smudge on the window. Anything to prove it wasn't perfect. Anything to prove it was real in the old messy way. He found nothing, absolutely nothing. He pinched his arm hard, the skin reddened, pain flared, a sharp, clear signal, the old cliché, pinch yourself to see if you're dreaming. It hurt. Therefore, he was awake. But awake to what? The pain felt real, the room felt real, the confusion felt intensely real. But the sum of these realities felt utterly false, a paradox. The more convincing the details, the less he believed the whole picture. It was like a beautifully rendered video game, impressive but not life. The unreality of it all was a suffocating blanket. He felt trapped, not by walls, but by the very nature of this existence. If this was a simulation, it was flawless. If it was a hallucination, it was persistent. He paced the small room back and forth, a caged animal, searching for an exit that wasn't there, or perhaps an exit he couldn't see. An exit that required a different kind of perception, a different kind of understanding. But all he had was mounting dread. A terrifying thought began to form. What if this was it? A genuine second chance? A clean slate? No past mistakes, no regrets, no burdens. Just this clean, quiet, perfect present. The idea had a seductive pull, to simply accept, to live in this new pristine reality. It was a tempting offer, especially when the alternative felt so broken, but the doubt was a persistent itch. If this was a gift, who was the giver? And what was the price? Clean slates weren't usually given freely. They were taken. Who had the power to wipe his memory, to place him here? And why? The questions buzzed like angry insects. They wouldn't let him rest. They wouldn't let him accept. The silence of the room seemed to mock his internal turmoil, his search for answers. Was this a benevolent act? An escape from something worse? Or was it a more sophisticated prison? A gilded cage, designed to keep him docile, compliant? The perfection could be a tool, a means of control. If everything was perfect, there was no need to strive, no need to change, no need to rebel. Just exist, quietly, peacefully, numbly. The more he thought about it, the more sinister the perfection seemed. A beautiful trap. He stood at the window, looking out at the flawless, artificial garden. He was at a crossroads, a critical choice point. He could try to embrace this new, strange reality, try to build a life from these sterile beginnings. Or he could resist. He could dig. He could search for the truth, for the cracks in this perfect facade, for the remnants of who he used to be. One path offered peace, perhaps. The other only uncertainty. And maybe, just maybe, a terrible truth. The choice itself felt like another test, another part of the program. He took a deep breath. The air was still too clean. He had to decide, and he had to decide now. Cedric chose to search for the truth,